They said I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't leadership material. My boss didn't even let me finish my pitch before shutting me down. He looked at me with that smug smile, the kind of smile people give when they think they've already won, and told me I wasn't qualified for the promotion. Not because of my work, not because of my results, but because, in his eyes, I just didn't belong at the top. But here's the part he didn't know. Less than 24 hours later, my phone rang, and it wasn't HR. It wasn't a rejection email. No, it was the CEO of the entire company, the man everyone looked up to, the man my boss desperately wanted approval from. And he wasn't calling to reject me. He was calling to discuss my new role. So how does someone go from being called unqualified to being handpicked by the CEO himself? Let me take you back, because this story isn't just about a promotion. It's about betrayal. It's about being underestimated. And it's about proving, without shouting, without begging, that success really is the sweetest form of revenge. I had been at the company for 3 years. Not the longest, not the shortest, but long enough to know how things worked. I didn't have connections. I didn't have family money to back me up, no silver spoon, just me, a laptop, and a work ethic sharp enough to cut through steel. While others left at 5 p.m. sharp, I stayed. While others argued in meetings, I built solutions. I wasn't loud, but I was consistent. My coworkers saw it. Some respected it. Others pretended not to notice. And then there was my boss. Mr. Jacobs, a man who didn't just fail to notice my work, he actively made sure no one else noticed it either. It became a pattern. I'd share an idea, he'd shoot it down. Someone else would repeat it later, and suddenly it was brilliant. I learned to keep my head down. But inside, I was waiting for the chance to prove that I was more than just the guy who stayed late. And then, one day, the chance came. A management role opened up. Not just any role. This was the role. Higher pay, bigger influence, a real seat at the table. I applied. I prepared. I gathered every number, every achievement, every success I had stacked over the years. I didn't just want it, I earned it. The day of the interview, I walked into that room with hope in my chest. This was supposed to be my moment. But Jacobs didn't even give me a chance. He leaned back, looked me over, and without hesitation said, "You're not management material." In that moment, I felt the weight of every late night, every ignored idea, every sacrifice I had made. He dismissed it all with one smug smile. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that his words weren't the end of my story. They were the beginning. Because the higher he tried to hold me down, the higher I was about to rise.
You know, the strange thing about being underestimated is how familiar it starts to feel after a while. At first, it stings. You feel like someone punched the air right out of your lungs. But then, when it happens again and again, you almost begin to expect it. You start preparing for disappointment like it's part of your routine. And that was life under Jacobs, my so-called boss, my so-called leader. For years, I worked harder than anyone else in that office. No exaggeration. I was the first one in, and most nights, the last one out. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I believed that hard work spoke louder than politics, that results couldn't be ignored forever. What a naive thought that turned out to be. Jacobs loved people who played his game, the ones who flattered him, who stayed on his good side, who made him feel like the smartest man in the room. It didn't matter if their work was half-baked. As long as they stroked his ego, they were golden. Me? I wasn't wired like that. I thought results would be enough. And maybe they would have been if someone else had been in charge. You see, the interview wasn't just a rejection. It was humiliation. The way he brushed me aside, like my career was nothing more than a minor inconvenience in his day, it was deliberate. He wanted to break me, to remind me where he thought I belonged. I remember walking out of that office, down the long corridor with those glass walls. My coworkers could see me through the glass. Some gave me sympathetic looks. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Everyone knew what had just happened. I went back to my desk, sat down, and stared at my computer screen. My hands were on the keyboard, but I couldn't type a single word. For the first time since I'd started at that company, I questioned myself. Maybe he was right. Maybe I wasn't management material. Maybe I was just meant to be the quiet worker in the background, the guy who picked up the slack but never stepped into the spotlight. The self-doubt crept in fast. It whispered in my ear that I had wasted years chasing something I was never going to reach, that I was just fooling myself. And the worst part, I almost believed it. That night, I stayed late again. Not because I had to, but because I didn't want to face myself at home. I buried myself in spreadsheets and reports, trying to convince myself that I still had worth, that I wasn't just invisible. It was one of those nights where the office was completely silent. Just me, the hum of the air conditioning, and the glow of the computer screen. I leaned back in my chair, rubbed my eyes, and thought, what's the point? But then something happened. Something small. Something almost insignificant, but it lit a spark. I got an email. Just a routine update on one of the projects I had worked on. A supply chain issue I had solved months ago. The report showed the impact of that fix. The revenue saved, the clients retained. It was all there, in numbers, in black and white. Proof. Proof that my work mattered. Proof that even if Jacobs didn't see me, the company was standing because of people like me. And in that moment, I made a decision. Jacobs could humiliate me. He could try to bury me. But I wasn't going to hand him my belief in myself. No. If the system was rigged, then I'd find another way. I didn't know it then, but that quiet decision, made in an empty office long after everyone had gone home, was the turning point. Because someone else was noticing my work. Someone higher than Jacobs. Someone with the power to change everything. And soon, that someone was going to call.
You know what the funny thing about life is? Just when you think you've been buried for good, sometimes you realize you've only been planted. The morning after my humiliation, I walked into the office like a ghost. My eyes were heavy, my chest tight. I had spent half the night replaying Jacob's words in my head. You're not management material. It was like a broken record I couldn't turn off. I sat at my desk, logged in, and forced myself to drown in busy work. Click after click, number after number, all just noise. And that's when it happened. My phone buzzed. At first I ignored it, probably just another useless email or some office calendar reminder. But then I noticed it wasn't my work phone. It was my personal one. And the number flashing across the screen wasn't one I recognized. Unknown number. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the answer button.
Something in my gut told me this wasn't an ordinary call. Finally, I picked up. A calm voice on the other end said, "Good morning. This is the CEO's office. Please hold for Mr. Turner." I froze. Completely froze. Did I hear that right? The CEO? The man who barely even spoke at company-wide meetings? The man who seemed untouchable, like a figure carved out of marble? I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, my mind racing faster than I could breathe. And then I heard it. "Hello, this is Jonathan Turner." The CEO himself. I didn't even know how to respond. I managed a quiet, "Yes, sir," but inside, my thoughts were colliding into each other. Why is he calling me? Did I do something wrong? Am I about to get fired? But then came the words that flipped my entire world upside down. "I've been revealing the reports from the last 2 quarters. Your name keeps coming up. The Williams Project, the supply chain recovery, the revenue turnaround. All roads lead back to you." I remember gripping the edge of my desk so hard my knuckles turned white. This couldn't be real. The CEO had noticed me. The same projects Jacobs brushed off, the same late nights no one acknowledged. He had seen it all. And then his voice dropped, slightly, more serious. "Why didn't you apply for the open management position?" I didn't even know how to answer. My throat went dry. I wanted to tell him everything, that I did apply, that Jacobs crushed me before I had the chance, that I was told I wasn't good enough. But all I managed was, "I thought I wasn't the right fit, sir." Even then, even speaking to the CEO, Jacobs' words still had a hold on me. But Mr. Turner, he chuckled too. Not kindly. No, this was different. A knowing chuckle. The kind of laugh a man makes when he sees the truth behind the mask. "Interesting," he said. "Come to my office this afternoon. We'll talk." And just like that, the call ended. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone as if it had just spoken a prophecy. My heart was pounding so loud I thought people around me could hear it. The CEO wanted to see me. Me! The same person Jacobs dismissed like an unwanted intern. That afternoon couldn't come fast enough. Hours felt like days. My hand shook each time I checked the clock. I kept imagining it was all some cruel prank, that maybe I'd walk into the CEO's office only to find Jacobs smirking at me again. But deep down, beneath the nerves, beneath the fear, something else was stirring, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I straightened my tie, grabbed my notes, though I wasn't even sure if I'd need them, and walked toward the top floor. The floor nobody in my position ever got invited to. The floor where real decisions were made. The elevator doors opened, and for the first time, I realized my life was about to change forever.
The walk to the CEO's office felt like miles. My palms were damp, my chest heavy, and yet there was a strange calm inside me too. Like the moment right before a storm hits. The higher I rode the elevator, the more I felt the weight of what was about to happen. I had spent years on the lower floors, unseen, unheard, grinding in the shadows. Now, for the first time, I was stepping into the light. When the doors opened, I almost lost my breath. The top floor was nothing like the one I was used to. Polished marble floors, walls lined with artwork I couldn't even name, and silence. An intimidating kind of silence. The kind that reminded you This was where power lived. I was guided into a large office, and there he was, Jonathan Turner, the CEO himself, a man whose presence filled the room even before he spoke. He didn't waste time. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You've been carrying more weight in this company than most people realize. I want you to know I see it and I value it." Those words alone, they hit me harder than Jacob's insult ever did. For the first time, someone at the very top recognized me. Not as a background worker, not as a quiet helper, but as a leader. And then came the twist I never saw coming. He didn't just offer me the management position I applied for. No, he offered me a higher role, a senior leadership role that went above the very job Jacobs had blocked me from. I sat there stunned, barely able to believe what I was hearing. While Jacobs thought he had clipped my wings, the CEO was strapping rockets to my back. I accepted, of course. How could I not? That afternoon, an email went out company-wide announcing my promotion. My inbox lit up like fireworks. Congratulations, messages, even shocked silence from some. But the one reaction I'll never forget was Jacob's. The look on his face when he saw the announcement was priceless. He tried to smile. Oh, he tried. But his jaw was tight, his eyes twitching at the corners. Because here's the delicious irony. My new role meant that Jacobs now reported to me. The same man who told me I wasn't qualified now had to send his approvals through my office. The same man who dismissed my ideas now had to sit across from me in meetings, forced to listen while I laid out strategies. I didn't need to humiliate him. I didn't need to gloat. My very existence in that role was revenge enough. I kept my composure. I treated him professionally. I didn't stoop to his level because I didn't need to. Every success, every recognition, every nod from the CEO was a reminder of how wrong he had been. And let me tell you, there's no sweeter revenge than watching the person who tried to bury you realize they only planted the seed that made you grow stronger. I started leading projects with more freedom than I ever imagined. Ideas that Jacobs once laughed off, now they were driving the company forward. And every time those ideas succeeded, I'd catch his expression, a mix of regret and bitterness. The best part? I never once mentioned his rejection. I never threw it back in his face because I didn't have to. Success spoke louder than anything I could have said. And while he shrank into the background, I finally stepped into the place I was meant to be. Not because someone handed it to me out of pity, not because I played office politics, but because I refused to let his insult define me. That right there was the moment I understood something powerful. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't screaming back. It's rising so high that the people who doubted you are forced to watch.
You know, looking back, I realize that my story wasn't just about a promotion. It was about something deeper, about how easy it is to let someone else's opinion of you become your truth. When Jacobs told me I wasn't management material, it cut deep. Not because it was true, but because for a moment, I believed him. That's the danger of being underestimated again and again, Eventually, you start underestimating yourself. But here's the lesson I learned. Your value does not decrease because someone else fails to see it. Your worth doesn't vanish because someone tries to dim your light. Sometimes the people above you aren't there because they're better, they're just louder. And sometimes their job isn't to guide you, it's to test you. If I had let Jacob's words define me, I would have stayed small. I would have stayed invisible. But life has a funny way of working. The CEO didn't call me because of luck. He called because the work I had been doing, the late nights, the long hours, the silent sacrifices, was undeniable. And isn't that the sweetest irony? The very projects my boss dismissed were the ones that made the CEO notice me. I could have lashed out. I could have rubbed my success in Jacob's face. But I didn't. Because real revenge isn't about shouting louder. It isn't about humiliating someone the way they humiliated you. No. The best revenge is proving them wrong by thriving, by succeeding, by rising so high that they can't even reach the ground you stand on. Sometimes silence is the loudest victory of all. So, if you're listening to this and you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if someone's ever looked you in the eye and said, "You don't belong," remember my story. Remember that their words are not the end. They're just noise. And you get to decide if you believe it or if you rise anyway. Because one day when success comes knocking on your door, the very people who doubted you will be forced to watch. And trust me, that moment is worth every second of the struggle.